Astrid Larsen stood in the cold Copenhagen rain, her threadbare coat soaked through, watching through the gleaming windows of Noma restaurant as her own father celebrated a business deal worth millions, unaware that his dead daughter was mere meters away, alive and starving. The morning fog rolled off the Resund, wrapping Copenhagen's cobblestone streets in a grey embrace that matched Astrid's mood perfectly. She pulled her worn denim jacket tighter around her thin frame as she hurried through Nyhavn. The colourful townhouse is a stark contrast to the dingy hostel room she called home. At 23, she had perfected the art of invisibility, head down, shoulders hunched, just another struggling university student in a city full of them. Astrid. Wait up. The familiar voice of her best friend Maja echoed across the square. Astrid turned to see the bubbly blonde jogging toward her, designer coffee in hand and not a care in the world. The irony wasn't lost on Astrid. Maja's family owned 3 small bakeries across Vesterbro, making them comfortably middle class, yet here was Astrid, secretly worth more than half of Denmark, pretending to scrape by on student loans. You look terrible, Maja said with characteristic bluntness, falling into step beside her. When's the last time you had a proper meal? And don't say yesterday because I saw you eating nothing but rye bread and butter at lunch. Astrid forced a smile, the same practiced expression she'd worn for the past 5 years since she'd faked her own death and disappeared from the Larsen empire. I'm fine, Maja. Just tired from working late at the cafe. The lie rolled off her tongue easily now. There was no cafe job, there never had been. Instead, she survived on a small emergency fund she'd hidden away before her accident, supplemented by odd jobs she picked up around the city. She'd become an expert at stretching every krona, shopping at discount stores, mending clothes until they fell apart. The girl who once had a personal stylist and ate at Michelin-starred restaurants now knew the exact price of every item at Netto and could make a pot of pasta last 3 days. Speaking of which, Maja continued, her eyes sparkling with excitement, my cousin Mikhail is having a party this weekend at his place in Sturbro. You should come. He's been asking about you. Astrid's stomach clenched. Mikhail worked in finance, moved in circles that occasionally brushed against her father's world. The risk of recognition, even after all these years and her dramatic weight loss, was too high. I can't. I have to work. You always have to work, Maja sighed. Sometimes I think you're hiding something, Astrid Larsen. The use of her real surname, the surname that graced buildings across Scandinavia, sent a chill down Astrid's spine. She'd kept her first name but changed her papers, her identity, everything else. To the world, Astrid Larsen, heir to the Larsen shipping and real estate fortune, had died in a tragic sailing accident off the coast of Bornholm 5 years ago. Her body was never found, which made sense since she'd been very much alive, hiding in a small fishing village, planning her new life. Sorry, money's tight, you know? Astrid replied, hating how naturally the victim act came to her now. They paused at the entrance to Copenhagen University, where Astrid was completing her master's in social work, a choice that would have horrified her father, Erik Larsen, who'd always insisted she study business to take over the family empire. The irony of studying to help society's most vulnerable while being one of Denmark's wealthiest people wasn't lost on her. I wish I could help more, Maja said, her voice soft with genuine concern. Maybe I could talk to my parents about giving you more shifts at the bakery. Astrid's heart ached at her friend's kindness. If only Maja knew that Astrid could buy her family's entire bakery chain with the interest from 1 month of her trust fund. But that money came with strings that led directly back to Erik Larsen and the life she desperately needed to escape. What would you do if you discovered your closest friend had been lying to you about everything? Leave a comment below with your thoughts. Welcome back, my incredible viewers. Your comments from the last video have been absolutely overwhelming. I can see how deeply you're all connecting with the story, and the theories you've been sharing are absolutely brilliant. Some of you are surprisingly close to the truth of what's coming next. But before we continue, don't forget to smash that like button if you're enjoying what you're seeing. Your support means the world to me and helps this channel grow. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss any of our uploads. We're building an amazing community here, and I don't want you to miss out on what's coming. And please, share this video with your friends, family, or anyone who would love this type of content. The more people we can bring into this community, the better it gets for everyone. Your engagement in the comments has been incredible, and I love reading every single one of your thoughts and theories. Keep them coming. Now, let's go in depth into the story. As they climbed the steps to the university, Astrid caught a glimpse of herself in the glass doors. Gone was the polished princess with the perfect blonde bob and designer clothes. In her place stood a woman with shoulder-length brown hair, dyed in a gas station bathroom, hollow cheeks, and clothes that had seen better decades. She'd lost nearly 20 kilos since her death, partly from stress, partly from genuine hunger. The transformation was so complete that even she sometimes didn't recognize herself. The lecture hall was already filling with students when they arrived for their morning class on poverty and social inequality, another cruel irony in Astrid's carefully constructed new life. Professor Hansen, a passionate advocate for Denmark's homeless population, was setting up his presentation when something on his laptop screen made Astrid's blood freeze. It was a news article from Berlingske, dated that morning. Larsen Industries announces massive layoffs, thousands of jobs at risk. Her father's face stared back at her from the screen, older now, with more grey in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes. The subtitle read, CEO Erik Larsen cites economic uncertainty as company struggles without air. Astrid's hands began to shake. She'd been so focused on her own escape, her own need to break free from the suffocating expectations and toxic family dynamics, that she'd never considered the ripple effects of her disappearance. Thousands of employees, people with families, mortgages, dreams, all potentially losing their livelihoods because she'd been too cowardly to face her problems head-on. "You okay?" Maja whispered, noticing Astrid's pale complexion. Astrid nodded mutely, but inside, her carefully built world was crumbling. The girl who'd spent 5 years running from her responsibilities was about to discover that sometimes, the past refuses to stay buried. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Kongens Nytorv as Astrid walked aimlessly through the city centre, Professor Hansen's lecture replaying in her mind. He'd spoken passionately about corporate responsibility, about how the wealthy elite often made decisions that devastated working families without ever seeing the human cost. Each word had felt like a personal accusation. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maja. "Emergency at the bakery. Can you cover my shift at the soup kitchen tonight? Please." The Vesterbro Community Kitchen, another piece of Astrid's carefully constructed identity. 3 evenings a week, she served meals to Copenhagen's homeless population, telling herself it was penance for her privileged upbringing. The truth was more complex. Being around people who'd lost everything made her feel less alone in her self-imposed exile. "Of course," she texted back, then immediately regretted it. Tonight was supposed to be quiet, a chance to process the morning's revelation about the layoffs. But backing out would raise questions she couldn't answer. The community center smelled of industrial disinfectant and simmering stew when Astrid arrived at 6. She tied her hair back with a worn elastic and slipped on the required hairnet, transforming once again into just another volunteer. The familiar routine was comforting: ladle the food, offer a smile, ask no questions about how people ended up needing help. Evening, Astrid. Lars, the center's coordinator, appeared beside her with his usual tired smile. At 62, he dedicated his life to helping others, and it showed in every weathered line of his face. "Busy night ahead. We've got about 40 more than usual." "Why the increase?" Astrid asked, though she suspected she already knew. Larsen Industries announced preliminary layoffs today. Word travels fast in the community. People are scared, preparing for the worst. Lars shook his head sadly. That company employs half of Amager, directly or indirectly. If they go under. Astrid's hand trembled as she gripped the serving ladle. "Do you think they will? Go under, I mean." Hard to say. Erik Larsen built that empire from nothing after the war, but has been struggling since his daughter died. Some say he lost his heart for business after that tragedy. Lars began arranging plates with practiced efficiency. Terrible thing. Losing a child. Changes a man. The room seemed to tilt around Astrid. Her father. Struggling? Heartbroken? The Erik Larsen she'd known was a titan of industry, cold and calculating, a man who'd missed her birthday 3 years running because of business meetings. The idea that her death had affected him emotionally seemed impossible. "Did you know her? The daughter?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Lars paused, something flickering in his expression. "Not personally, but, well, there were rumors in certain circles. Some people thought she might have run away rather than died. A young woman, trapped by expectations, desperate for freedom." He studied Astrid's face carefully. People do desperate things when they feel they have no other choice. Astrid's blood turned to ice. Did he know? Had she somehow given herself away despite years of careful deception? Before she could respond, the dinner rush began. A steady stream of people filled the serving line. Construction workers worried about their jobs, elderly pensioners stretching their budgets, families who'd fallen through Denmark's usually reliable social safety net. Each face was a reminder of what her selfishness had potentially cost. Then she saw him. Niels Andersen stood in line, his once expensive suit now wrinkled and slightly too large for his diminished frame. Astrid recognized him immediately. Her father's former head of accounting, a man who'd worked for Larsen Industries for 27 years. He'd been at every company Christmas party, had given her a beautiful leather portfolio for her 18th birthday. Have you ever had to face the consequences of a decision you thought only affected you? What would you do in Astrid's position? Share your thoughts below. Next please, Astrid managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Niels stepped forward, his eyes focused on the floor. Up close, she could see the toll recent months had taken. The weight loss, the exhaustion, the defeat written in every line of his posture. Good evening, he said quietly, extending his plate. Thank you for doing this. Astrid ladled the stew with shaking hands, praying her voice wouldn't betray her. It's my pleasure. Something in her tone made him look up, and for a terrifying moment, their eyes met. She saw a flicker of confusion cross his face, a spark of recognition that he couldn't quite place. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she handed him the plate. Do I know you from somewhere? Niels asked, his brow furrowing. I don't think so, Astrid replied quickly, already turning toward the next person in line. I have one of those faces, I suppose. But Niels didn't move. He stood there, studying her profile, his accounting mind, trained to notice discrepancies and patterns, working through possibilities she couldn't control. You remind me of someone, he murmured, more to himself than to her. Someone I used to know. Lars appeared suddenly, gently guiding Niels toward a table. Come on, friend. Food's getting cold. As Niels walked away, still glancing back with puzzled eyes, Astrid knew her carefully constructed world was beginning to fracture. The catalyst had been set in motion, and there would be no going back. 3 days after the soup kitchen encounter, Astrid couldn't shake the image of Niels Andersen's puzzled expression. She'd barely slept, jumping at every unexpected sound, checking over her shoulder on every street corner. The paranoia was exhausting, but not as exhausting as the guilt that gnawed at her with each passing hour. She sat in the back corner of Café Norden, nursing her third cup of coffee and pretending to study, when Maja burst through the door with the energy of a small hurricane. Her friend's face was flushed with excitement as she scanned the café, finally spotting Astrid in her usual hiding spot. You'll never believe what happened, Maja said, sliding into the opposite chair without invitation. My cousin Mikael just called. His firm is handling some kind of investigation for Larsen Industries. Astrid's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, clattering against the saucer. What kind of investigation? Something about their missing heir. Apparently, there are rumors she might still be alive. Maya's eyes sparkled with the thrill of gossip. Can you imagine? All these years, everyone thought she was dead, but now they think she might have staged the whole thing. The cafe suddenly felt impossibly small, the walls closing in around Astrid. That's ridiculous. Why would someone fake their own death? Think about it. Maja leaned forward conspiratorially. She was 23, set to inherit billions, but completely controlled by her father. No freedom, no real relationships, just endless pressure to be perfect. Maybe she just snapped. Each word hit Astrid like a physical blow. Maya's casual analysis of her motivations was more accurate than any psychological profile could have been. The irony that her closest friend was dissecting her life choices while sitting mere meters away would have been funny if it weren't so terrifying. What makes them think she's alive? Astrid managed, proud of how steady her voice sounded. Mikael didn't have details, but apparently someone came forward. A witness or something. Maja shrugged. Honestly, I feel sorry for her father. Imagine finding out your daughter let you grieve for 5 years while she was out there somewhere, living her best life. Astrid excused herself to the bathroom, where she promptly vomited up what little food she'd managed to eat that morning. In the mirror, her reflection looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, haunted. The girl who'd thought she was so clever, so careful in covering her tracks, was about to discover that secrets this big have a way of finding the light. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Tonight. Assiston Cemetery, 10 p.m. Come alone. A friend who knows the truth." Astrid's hand shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone. Someone knew. After 5 years of perfect deception, someone had figured it out. The question was, what did they want? The rest of the day passed in a haze of anxiety. Astrid went through the motions of normalcy, attending her afternoon seminar on family social services, another cruel irony, buying groceries she couldn't afford, pretending to care about her thesis on childhood poverty. But her mind was elsewhere, calculating escape routes, contingency plans, ways to disappear again if necessary. As evening approached, she found herself standing outside her father's corporate headquarters on Gammel Strand. The Larsen Industries Tower rose 40 stories into the Copenhagen sky, its glass and steel facade reflecting the late autumn sunset. She'd avoided this building for 5 years, but tonight, something drew her here. Through the illuminated windows of the top floor, she could see figures moving around the executive conference room. Board members, probably, discussing the company's future. Discussing her. Beautiful building, isn't it? Astrid spun around to find Lars from the community center standing behind her, his kind eyes now sharp with purpose. He was dressed differently, a well-tailored coat instead of his usual volunteer clothing, polished shoes that spoke of money she hadn't suspected he possessed. "Lars? What are you doing here?" "The same thing you are, I suspect. Wondering what happens next." He moved to stand beside her, both of them gazing up at the tower. "I sent you the text, by the way. Though I suppose you figured that out." Astrid's fight-or-flight instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs felt like lead. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Astrid Larsen," he said simply. "Beloved daughter of Erik Larsen, supposedly drowned off Bornholm 5 years ago. Except she didn't drown, did she? She reinvented herself, changed her appearance, and created a new identity. Started volunteering at a soup kitchen, studying social work, living in poverty to understand what she'd been sheltered from her entire life." The words hung in the air between them like an accusation. Astrid felt the last of her carefully constructed walls crumbling. "How long have you known?" she whispered. "I suspected from the first night you volunteered. You held the serving spoon like you'd never done manual labor in your life. You spoke Danish with the slight international accent of someone educated in expensive schools. And your eyes." He turned to look at her directly. "You have your mother's eyes. I'd recognize them anywhere." "My mother." Astrid's voice cracked. Her mother had died when she was 12, a loss that had driven the final wedge between her and her father. "Ingrid and I were close before she married your father. I've spent the last 30 years wondering what my life might have been if I'd fought harder for her." Lars's voice carried decades of regret. "When she died, Erik shut everyone out, including you. I watched from a distance as that brilliant, passionate man turned into a cold corporate machine, and I watched as his daughter grew up starving for affection. What would you do if someone from your past suddenly reappeared with knowledge that could change everything? Have you ever had to face a choice between self-preservation and doing what's right? Let us know in the comments." Astrid sank onto a nearby bench, the weight of revelation crushing her. "What do you want from me?" Lars sat beside her, his presence surprisingly comforting. "I want you to look up at that building and see what I see. The lights burning late into the night because your father can't sleep. The emergency board meetings because the company is hemorrhaging money without clear leadership. The thousands of employees whose livelihoods depend on decisions being made by a man who's been half dead inside since he lost you." "He never cared about me," Astrid said bitterly. "Everything was about the company, about maintaining the Larsen legacy. I was just another asset to be managed." "Is that what you really believe?" Lars asked gently. "Or is that what you told yourself to justify running away?" Above them, a figure appeared in the corner office window, tall, distinguished, with silver hair catching the light. Even from 40 stories below, Astrid could see the slump in her father's shoulders, the exhaustion in his posture. "He's dying," Lars said quietly. "Not physically, but spiritually. The Erik Larsen I knew, your mother's Erik, died the day he thought he lost you. What's left is just going through the motions." Astrid watched her father's silhouette move across the window, and for the first time in 5 years, she allowed herself to consider that maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong about everything. Astrid didn't go to Assiston Cemetery that night. Instead, She found herself standing in the marble lobby of Larsen Industries at 11:47 p.m., her reflection multiplied infinitely in the polished surfaces surrounding her. The night security guard, Bent, recognized her immediately despite the years and the drastic changes to her appearance. Miss Astrid. His weathered face crumpled with disbelief. But, we thought, your father thought. I know what everyone thought, she said quietly. Is he still upstairs? Bent nodded, his hand shaking as he reached for his phone. Should I call him? Tell him you're... No. Astrid placed her hand over his, stopping him. I need to do this myself. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt eternal. Each floor that passed was another layer of her old life, another memory she tried to bury. The executive level was dark except for the soft glow emanating from her father's corner office. Through the glass walls, she could see him hunched over his desk, the same way she remembered from childhood, always working, always unreachable. She stood in the doorway for a full minute before he sensed her presence. When Erik Larsen looked up from his papers, the pen fell from his fingers and clattered to the floor. Astrid. Her name was barely a whisper, as if speaking it too loudly might make her disappear again. My God. Astrid. He looked older than his 62 years. The silver hair she'd glimpsed from the street was now almost entirely white, and deep lines etched his face like a map of suffering. But his eyes, those sharp blue eyes that had intimidated business rivals and government officials, were filled with something she'd never seen before, pure, desperate love. Hello, far, she said, using the Danish word for father that she hadn't spoken in 5 years. Erik stood slowly, as if afraid any sudden movement might shatter this impossible moment. You're alive. All this time, you've been alive. I'm sorry. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. I'm so sorry, Far. I thought you'd be better off without me. I thought the company mattered more than... The company. Erik's voice cracked. Astrid, I would burn this entire empire to the ground if it meant having one more day with you. Do you understand that? One more day. He moved toward her then, his businessman's composure completely shattered. When they told me you were gone, when they said your boat capsized and they couldn't find your body, something inside me died. I kept hoping, kept believing that somehow you'd survived, but as the months turned to years. Astrid saw tears streaming down her father's face, and the sight broke something fundamental inside her. This wasn't the cold, calculating businessman she'd run from. This was a broken man who'd spent 5 years grieving a daughter he'd never stopped loving. I saw the reports about the layoffs, she said, her own voice thick with tears. All those people losing their jobs because I was too much of a coward to. Those jobs, this company, none of it matters without you. Erik stopped just out of arm's reach, as if afraid she might vanish if he came too close. After your mom died, I threw myself into work because I didn't know how to be a father to a daughter who reminded me so much of her. Every time I looked at you, I saw Ingrid smile, her passion, her fire. It was beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. You never told me that, Astrid whispered. I know. I failed you in every way that mattered. I was so afraid of losing you the way I lost her that I pushed you away, trying to make you strong and independent. But all I did was make you feel unloved. Erik's hands trembled at his sides. The night of your 23rd birthday, when you didn't come home, I planned to apologize. To tell you that you didn't have to take over the company, that you could choose your own path. But then the Coast Guard called. The office fell silent except for the sound of their breathing and the distant hum of the city below. Astrid stared at the man she'd spent 5 years believing didn't care about her, seeing him clearly for the first time. I studied social work, she said suddenly. I've been living in Vesterbro, working with homeless people, learning about poverty and inequality. Everything you said the company should never concern itself with. Erik's face lit up with something that looked like pride. Of course you did. You always had your mother's heart for helping others. I should have encouraged that instead of trying to force you into my mold. The business is failing because of me. The business was already failing because I lost my purpose when I lost you. Success without family to share it with is just elaborate failure. Erik took a tentative step closer. Astrid, I don't care if you never set foot in this building again. I don't care if you want to spend your life helping people in soup kitchens. I just want my daughter back. I want the chance to be the father I should have been from the beginning. For 5 years, Astrid had imagined this confrontation. She'd pictured anger, recriminations, demands that she return to her predetermined role. She'd never imagined this: raw love, desperate forgiveness, a father who'd been as lost as she was. "Can you forgive me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Eric crossed the remaining distance between them and pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear again. "Can you forgive me for letting you feel so alone that running away seemed like the only option?" They held each other in the quiet office, two people who'd spent 5 years grieving for something they'd never actually lost. Outside the windows, Copenhagen sparkled in the darkness, a city full of possibilities they'd never allowed themselves to consider. 6 months later, the Vesterbro community kitchen had never looked better. Fresh paint covered the walls, new equipment gleamed in the serving area, and the expanded dining room buzzed with conversation in a dozen languages. But the most significant change wasn't visible. It was the sense of hope that permeated the space, a belief that everyone deserved dignity regardless of their circumstances. Astrid Larsson stood behind the serving counter, her hair now its natural blonde but still pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, clothes that were comfortable rather than designer, though she could afford anything she wanted. The hollow look had left her cheeks, replaced by the healthy glow of someone who'd found her purpose. "Miss Astrid, the reporters are here," Maya called from the entrance, her voice bubbling with excitement. In the months since the truth had come out, Maya had appointed herself as Astrid's unofficial press manager, fielding interview requests and managing the constant attention that came with being Denmark's most famous returned from the dead heiress. "Tell them to wait," Astrid replied, ladling soup into a bowl for Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman who'd become a regular. "Mrs. P gets served first, reporters second." Mrs. Peterson beamed, patting Astrid's hand with weathered fingers. "Such a good girl. Your father raised you right." If only she knew, Astrid thought with amusement. The truth was, her father was still learning how to be a parent, and she was still learning how to be a daughter. Their relationship was a work in progress, built on daily phone calls, weekly dinners, and the shared mission that had become their bridge back to each other. "Are you ready for the big announcement?" Lars asked, appearing at her elbow with his own serving ladle. He'd officially left his coordinator position to become the director of the newly established Larsson Foundation, though he insisted on still serving meals twice a week. Astrid nodded, though butterflies danced in her stomach. Today marked the public launch of their ambitious plan, a network of community centers, job training programs, and affordable housing initiatives that would transform how Denmark approached poverty and unemployment. It was her father's money, but her vision, a perfect marriage of resources and compassion. Through the kitchen's windows, she could see the Larsson Industries tower in the distance. The company had not only recovered from its near collapse but was thriving under new leadership. Eric remained CEO, but he'd restructured everything, bringing in younger voices, implementing sustainable practices, and ensuring that profit was balanced with social responsibility. The old saying was true: success without purpose was indeed just elaborate failure. "Miss Larsson." A familiar voice made her turn. Niels Andersen stood in the serving line, but this wasn't the defeated man she'd encountered months ago. He wore a crisp new suit and carried himself with renewed confidence. "Mr. Andersen, you look wonderful," Astrid said, genuinely pleased to see the transformation. "Thanks to you and your father's retraining program, I'm back in accounting. Better than ever, actually. I'm working with small businesses now, helping them navigate their finances." He smiled warmly. "I wanted to thank you in person. Not just for the job opportunity, but for what you did that night at the soup kitchen. Serving others when you didn't have to, even though you could have been anywhere else in the world." "I needed to be here," Astrid replied simply. "This work saved me as much as I might have helped others." The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 5 years running from privilege only to discover that privilege came with responsibility. Not the suffocating kind her younger self had imagined, but the meaningful kind that came from using resources to lift others up. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya announced with theatrical flair, "if you could gather around, we have some exciting news to share." The dining room quieted as Eric Larsson entered, looking more relaxed and genuinely happy than Astrid had ever seen him. At 63, he'd finally learned to smile with his eyes instead of just his mouth. He moved to stand beside his daughter, and the resemblance between them was striking, not just physically, but in the way they both radiated quiet confidence and purposeful energy. "6 months ago," Eric began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. My company was failing, my employees were suffering, and I believed my daughter was gone forever. But life has a way of surprising us. He placed a hand on Astrid's shoulder, a gesture that would have felt foreign a year ago but now felt natural. Today, we're announcing the expansion of the Larsen Foundation's community programs to 20 cities across Denmark. We're creating 5,000 new jobs, building affordable housing for 10,000 families, and establishing education centers that will serve 50,000 people annually. The room erupted in applause, but Erik raised his hand for quiet. But more than that, we're announcing that my daughter, Dr. Astrid Larsen, yes, she finished her master's degree while managing all of this, will be taking over as chairman of the Larsen Foundation, with full authority to expand these programs internationally. What does it mean to truly come home? Have you ever discovered that the thing you were running from was actually what you needed most? Share your story with us in the comments. We'd love to hear how you found your way back to what matters. Astrid felt tears prick her eyes as she looked around the room filled with people whose lives had been touched by second chances. Mrs. Peterson wiped her eyes with a napkin. Niels beamed with pride. Lars nodded approvingly. And Maja was already taking pictures for her social media accounts. I spent 5 years learning what it means to struggle, Astrid said, her voice steady despite her emotions. I learned that dignity isn't about how much money you have, it's about being seen, being valued, being given the chance to contribute. Every person in this room has taught me something about resilience, about community, about hope. She paused, looking directly at her father. I also learned that sometimes we have to lose everything to find what was there all along. Family isn't about perfect understanding, it's about choosing to keep trying, keep forgiving, keep loving even when it's difficult. Erik's eyes glistened as he pulled her into a hug that the cameras captured but couldn't diminish. It was a moment of pure connection, father and daughter finally understanding each other. Later, as the reporters packed up their equipment and the last of the dinner guests headed home, Astrid stood in the empty kitchen with her father and Lars, looking out at the Copenhagen skyline. So, Erik said with a grin that made him look decades younger, ready to change the world. Astrid laughed, the sound rich and genuine. I think we already started. The girl who'd thought she had to choose between family and freedom, between wealth and authenticity, between love and independence, had discovered something beautiful. The best life wasn't about choosing sides, it was about building bridges. Outside, snow began to fall over Copenhagen, covering the city in pristine white. It was the kind of snow that made everything look possible, that promised fresh starts and new beginnings. And for the Larsen family, that promise had finally become reality. In the distance, the lights of the Larsen Industries Tower twinkled like stars, no longer a symbol of cold corporate power but a beacon of hope for thousands of people whose lives had been transformed by the love between a father and daughter who'd found their way back to each other. The billionaire's daughter had stopped pretending to be poor, and in doing so, had discovered how to be truly rich. I'm glad you joined us on Astrid's journey from isolation to connection, from running away to running toward what matters most. This story reminds us that sometimes the very thing we're afraid of, vulnerability, forgiveness, coming home, is exactly what we need to heal and grow. What resonated most with you in Astrid's transformation? How do you define true wealth in your own life? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching till the end. We know you loved this story, and there are many more thrilling ones waiting for you. Just click on the video on your screen to dive into the next chapter.